everybody, Mike Fifer with Fifer Hobby Supply. This morning I'm going to take you out here in the garage and we're going to do a little demonstration. I'll show you how to do the inside of your tunnels. I have a very easy method of doing it, and the bill of materials is really small. So let's go out here and take a look at how it's done. Okay everybody, to get started here, here's the things we need. We need a hot glue gun, your tunnel portal. I happen to have a couple of wing walls here that I don't know whether we'll wind up using. A ruler, a sharp, hobby knife, not a very good one, but a sharp one. Your track. This is just a demonstration piece. These portals or liners can actually be curved or straight, whatever shape you want them to be, and you'll see how that goes later on. I'm using a piece of Unitrack. Some black foam core board. The thickness doesn't matter. Okay, I have another piece of it here. I've already cut a square out that I'm just going to work on. I would recommend a cutting mat, which if you don't have one, you could use a piece of wood or cardboard or anything. I happen to have stolen this from Robin. And I'm going to use khaki tan as my rock color inside, and you'll see how we do that afterwards using a dry brush technique. A little piece of HO cork for my purposes in my Unitrack, and you'll see that in a few minutes how we utilize that. My trusty butter dish paint lid, and I think we have everything. If we don't, I'll add something along the way. Let's get started. Okay everybody, the first thing I'm going to do is get my piece of Unitrack anchored down, and I'm just going to put a couple of dabs of hot glue on the bottom of it. You can use, on your track, of course, you can use whatever method you see fit to attach your track. Now, one of the mistakes that a lot of guys make is they take it for granted that your tunnel portal is tall enough. One thing I don't have out here is an N-scale gauge, but I can tell you, let me turn this, I can tell you that if you mount this down at this level, your auto racks and your stack cars will not fit through it. However, most portals, if you center them up properly on your track, which this isn't quite dry, but if you center this up, you're going to need the base of the tunnel portal even with the tie height. So this is where the HO cork comes in. This HO cork just happens to be the exact right size to lift your portal up to track level, and I'll show you how that works. We have the cut edge of your cork, and we're going to flip that upside down and against our track. On both sides. There is a use for HO cork in the N-scale world. I also raise buildings and things up to track level by doing the same thing, such as my depot and so forth. These don't have to be pretty because you can put scenery around them later. But now we have the base for our tunnel portal. We're going to use a little more of this, but just for the purpose of showing this is how I did it right now. I'm going to take a wild guess at the height, or the position I should say, of my tunnel portal, and we're going to say it's going to be right here, and you want it to be as vertical as possible. We can correct some of this afterwards, and centered. This may or may not be, but this is where it all starts. And let me start the video again, and we'll move on with the back portion of it, and we'll continue this on. Okay, I've taken the liberty of going ahead and putting these pieces of cork in. I know I don't have any track in there, but it gives us the illusion that the tunnel actually does make a curve, which is kind of what I want to demonstrate as well. The first thing we need to do, or one thing we need to do, is measure the height of our tunnel portal. And this one here is approximately 2.5 inches, just a hair under 2.5 inches. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to set this aside for right now. We're going to get our foam core board, and this doesn't have to be exact by any stretch of the imagination. We're going to measure 2.5 inches. I'm going to make a little mark on here. line it up on my cutting pad, and I'm going to just, doesn't even have to be perfect, but I'm going to cut a long strip of this foam core board that's approximately 2.5 inches high. And I'm going to cut it at about 2/3. You can make these as long as you want. Keep in mind though that if you get inside this, your mountain here that you make or whatever, you're going to need room for your hands. So make your length of your tunnel interior as short as possible to still have access to get your hand or a tool in there. Now what we're going to do at this point is, and I hope this shows up on the camera, we're going to, you can see the surface of this thing. Here's what we're going to do. We're just going to bend this thing all to pieces. Bend and bend and bend and push with your thumb and just basically crease, just really crease this thing up. Now you can see we kind of almost have what appears to be a rock surface. We're going to do the same thing with the other piece, except we're going to have to bend it back out in the different curve, so some of this texture may go away. However, generally you're going to be looking into the tunnel portal from the side that has the most curve to it. I mean, that's kind of as a rule, not always a hard statement. But anyways, you can see that even after I've crinkled it up and I bend it back in another angle, it still has some rock texture to it. I hope you can see that anyway. So now we kind of have an inner and an outer curve. And we're just going to leave them at a nondescript curve, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with them right now. Okay, I have my trusty old junky brush, our khaki tan that we're going to use to do a technique called dry brushing. Some of you may or may not be familiar with. I'm going to put a little bit, just a little bit is all I'm going to need on my butter dish lid. Oh, I need a paper towel. Hold on. I'm going to put some on the brush, and we're just basically going to wipe most of it off, and I'm going to take my piece and I'm going to dry brush the heck out of it here. Now you could use any color you want. You could use a reddish color on here. You could use whatever color your scenery is going to be. That's the color that I would use. Now you can see that we have sort of a rock color. I could actually make that a little bit more defined by going different directions. Keep moving. The idea with the dry brushing is no matter how heavy you put it on is to keep moving. Now you can see that we kind of have a rock surface. Going to do the same thing. This would be the inside because we're going to put it in there this way. And this stuff obviously doesn't have to be perfect because it's something that you're hardly ever going to see except when you look directly into the portal, and usually right at the very edge. I don't like the way this brush stroke here came out, so we're going to lighten that up some. Now you can see that we've dry brushed both of our tunnel liner pieces in a color, not necessarily your color, but a color. Okay, let's move on to the next step, and I'll clean out my brush. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to test fit our pieces, and we want to make sure that this cut here is relatively vertical. I'm not a stickler on absolutely vertical, but when we mount this, you want to check this radius, and you want to make sure that you don't get any cars or anything rubbing up against this. So my recommendation is to put it out a ways from the edge of the track. We're just going to guess at this. Normally I would put a car, my biggest or longest car, usually a passenger car, on here and see if I have clearance. But this one we're just going to guess at because we don't really have anything in there, obviously. So I'm going to put a little hot glue along the bottom of this guy. And I'm going to stick him up against the outside edge of my tunnel portal, and we're going to leave plenty of room here. Now you can see that it sticks pretty fast. I'm going to turn it around, and for extra support I generally put hot glue down the side of the portal. And you can also put some along the bottom of this to give it some strength, which we'll do. Now we're going to let that dry while we move on over here to the other side. And basically the same thing applies to the opposite side. I'll turn this around and maybe you can see how this is going to work. This is going to go to the outside edge of our portal, and we're just going to leave plenty of room. Okay? It's the same thing we just did. In fact, on this one I'll put a little bit of glue down the side of this guy to stick to the back of the tunnel portal. And I'm hoping I have enough glue here without putting another stick in. Anyway, I'll tip this up. Maybe you can see here. Stick it to the outside edge of the portal. Make sure we have enough room. Turn it around. I think I'm out of glue, but we're going to do this anyway. Yep, I'm out of glue. But anyway, we would put more glue along here and more glue along this side. Now you can see that we pretty much have a tunnel liner. You could go in here, and I have gone in there and actually painted this black. You may want to have had all of your track in here ballasted already. But basically blacken up everything in here, and that way you don't see too much of anything inside on the base of the tunnel. Obviously we didn't do that here, but you'll get the effect. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, there's basically a couple more steps here, but one thing I wanted to show you is I was going to put a wing wall in, but when I put the wing wall up here, the wing wall is taller. It's by a different manufacturer. It's taller than the portal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to notch out my cork. I hope. Actually have a lot of hot glue there, that's the problem. And what I'm going to do is, now that I've notched that out, you can see that it fits pretty good up against, not quite perfect. Not that I like perfect, I'm just saying. Or I should say, not that I have to have perfect. But if I can get it up against, I'll get it up against. It just leaves less filling later. But anyway, we're going to slap this wing wall in there. We're going to put a little bit of hot glue along the back edge, not the front because it'll squish out, and then along the bottom of this wing wall. And we're going to go ahead and stick this in here for aesthetics, or looks, for those of you who don't have as good a vocabulary as I do, or the limited vocabulary that I do is really what I should say. Didn't mean that to be insulting, actually. That just shows you how dumb my vocabulary is. Anyways, I'm going to put glue along the back edge here, just to support this wing wall. Now you might not necessarily be able to do this where you're putting it, but we're doing it here because we have access to it. These dumb strings. You want to make sure, by the way, that all of these hot glue strings are out of your tunnel portal before we do this next step. Now I'm going to set this back aside, almost. First we're going to measure. This is approximately another 2.5 inches, and it's curved. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another piece approximately 2.5 inches, probably a little bigger since we're curved. In fact, we'll just go ahead and use this piece right here like it is. We're going to make a top, And I'm not going to make it very deep because there again, like I said, you got to be able to get a tool or your hand in there at some point. So you have to use your own discretion as to how much of this you actually want to cover. I generally like to cover enough that when I get the scenery built over this and a cover here, that I can keep the plaster from falling. Turn this. I can keep the plaster from falling into what I've done here at this point. That way I can start my plaster cloth or whatever here, and I can go up, and I don't have to really worry about when my plaster cloth comes in contact with this. I don't have to worry about anything going down in there. So I'm going to recut this again because we're going to make it shorter. I'm going to make it about this big. Foam core is cheap. And we're just going to make a little lid here. Just for the sake of some problems that I've had before, I know you can't see it very well on the camera. I'll try and turn it this way. Maybe I can do it this way. I'm going to try and cut a 45 in this, or something similar. And the reason being, when you put this on here, it makes it much easier to get your plaster cloth at an angle down to where you need it, okay? And what we're going to do is we're just going to put a little glue along the top of this, and a little glue in this area here. Probably enough just to try and close up that gap. We could actually cut the foam core off, but we're not going to do that because we're going to hurry. Pulling my strings out, and we're just going to set this lid on there. And this gives your portal some structure. And you don't really need to crinkle the top because there's nobody going to walk in there and look up at the top of your tunnel portal. I do recommend filling this gap, because whatever your scenery material would migrate back through there. So now, if we had a piece of black cloth or something, we put it over there, it would be nice and dark. And what I'll do, and this is pretty much it. Once you get to this stage here, you've actually finished your tunnel portal. Well, everybody, that's how easy it can be. And it's exactly how I did this portal over here and the rest of them in here. Well, actually, the one down here as well. It's quick, easy, simple, and gives your tunnel portal some support without having to do a lot of foam work and stuff. It's as you can see, it was really easy. We'll see you next time, okay? And I hope you enjoyed this video. Come back and see us.